Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Nick, for that introduction. As Nick has said, I'm going to talk about IVCC's work in developing novel vector control products and give you a little bit of an insight into our development pipeline. But first of all, for those in the audience who are less familiar with IVCC, I'll just give a little bit of an outline about the organisation. We are a product development partnership, and that means that we use investors' funds, donor funds, in order to overcome barriers to innovation in vector control. And our core focus is on malaria, although we do extend into other neglected tropical diseases. And this slide shows you our key donors on the left-hand side here. And really, it's so important to have this financial support for the work we do, because the market challenges are significant in vector control, as I'm sure you're aware, and we need to de-risk innovation. We also have access to an excellent scientific expert community who enable us to get peer review and great expertise into the project management of our product pipeline. And finally, as Nick has also already referred to, we're very focused on delivery. We're very focused on development and impact. We are impact driven. And we can't do this work alone. We are a partnership, and we partner with all sorts of organisations in order to achieve our goals. So we've talked about our funders, but we're also working with many innovators and manufacturers, and then we access the communities and academia in order to do underpinning science to really help our development activities. We also have access to field and lab site facilities, which is really critical given the very specialist work in vector control. And you can see a couple of illustrations here. And then more recent times, we've been thinking about how to actually make an impact through the implementation programs, because it's all very well to develop products, but if we haven't got the implementation programs lined up, then impact will be limited. Now, I'm sure you're all aware that significant progress has been made in the fight against malaria globally, and this is a map from starting at the millennium, where there was a really concerted effort to tackle malaria as a disease, and malaria deaths have almost halved in that time. But still, there is a significant problem in Africa, and particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. So, how do we continue to tackle that opportunity? Well, vector control is very important, very central to the fight against malaria, and has made a significant impact since that millennium time in bringing down the cases of malaria. And this slide from the Malarious Atlas project shows us that of these different interventions that have been measured in terms of their impact, bed nets, as you can see here, have had the largest single role to play in terms of bringing down the number of cases of malaria in that time. Drugs are important as well, as are indoor residual sprays. So vector control has had a significant impact in terms of the number of cases of malaria that have been averted, and I think that's about 78%. So, but of course, vector control alone will not do the job, and it's an important part of an integrated tools management approach towards malaria elimination and eventual eradication. But it's very important that we continue to be able to, or that vector control is able to continue to play that significant part that it has already established. But there's a big challenge ahead. As I'm sure you're aware, insecticide resistance is beginning to be recognised as a significant component. And this map shows us where resistance has been measured in various countries around the world. And as you can see, in this area of Africa, where we're really focusing our efforts and where malaria is still a significant problem, equally insecticide resistance is beginning to look significant as well. And that is going to threaten the ability of vector control to deliver benefits. And I guess Nick alluded to the fact that there's Traditionally, there's been 4 areas of chemistry that have been used in vector control products, and really probably through the overuse of these products and the inability to switch from one chemical class to another, we're beginning to see resistance to all these classes of insecticides. So pyrethroid is very significant. If you look at the African figures, which is the left-hand bars on this graph, the organochlorines, DDT, carbamates, and organophosphates, less so with organophosphates, but these classes have all seen significant resistance. But you might ask, well, does that actually really make a difference at the end of the day when it comes to tackling malaria? And there's very interesting data generated from a PMI map study by Phil Ricks, where in Ghana they were noticing significant resistance to pyrethroids and switched their IRS program from pyrethroids to organophosphates in 2012. And you can see the impact that that's had on parasitemia and RDT measurements over that time. So I think we can say from this sort of simple type of analysis that actually insecticide resistance does have a significant impact. So IVCC is really thinking about how do we maintain the gains that we've already made, those fantastic gains in malaria reduction through vector control, but how do we maintain that in the face of insecticide resistance, where we can see if products start to break down, that actually has an impact on the rates of transmission. So we go back to the WHO GPERM guide for our reference, and this is directly taken from GPERM, which was published in 2012, and provides advice for provides advice for users about how to use your vector control products. So here it's saying, well, for IRS, when you've got an annual spray, you should try and rotate or use combinations of different chemistries, or think about mosaics. And for bed nets, it's saying use combinations of active ingredients, because that way that will help to prevent the occurrence of insecticide resistance in mosquitoes. So the message is very much about being proactive, taking preemptive action, and preserving the life span of insecticides by taking these actions in implementation practices. So in IVCC, we've had a look at this and thought, well, what does this mean for the work we want to do with our partners, and how do we actually build products that are going to be effective in the marketplace in terms of managing vector control, and how do we make sure that massive investment that we have to put into developing any new products leaves us with sustainable products that aren't going to break down and become ineffective after a few years in use. So IVCC's ambition is based on GPERM, and our concept is to provide an insecticide toolbox from which we can make new products. So that would be indoor residual sprays or dual active ingredient bed nets, and that with the idea that these would be used in a good, proactive, preemptive IRM, insecticide resistance management program. And we come up with this little sort of cartoon here, whereby we envisage a situation where you've got 3 different chemistries that are used in a 3-year rotation cycle for indoor residual sprays. And then if you're using bed nets, a dual active ingredient bed net, where both of those active ingredients are fully effective against the mosquito, would be used, and we know that bed nets are expected to last for 3 years. So after the one bed net has come to the end of its useful life, we'd want to switch to a different bed net, but that would have to have two new fresh active ingredients in order to combat any resistance that might have crept in to the first bed net. So by looking at this, we see that we need quite a range of different active ingredients if we're really going to establish a sustainable toolbox of vector control products for the future. So that's the foundation of what we do in IVCC, and I want to tell you a little bit more about our development pipeline now. So as Nick has already said, IVCC was founded in 2005, and obviously at that point there's some moving things together, and we really started the work that I want to talk about today just under 10 years ago, sort of around 2008, and collaborating with some significant industrial partners at this point, and we set about our novel active ingredient screening program. And we've partnered with various manufacturers who have access to fantastic libraries of potential insecticides, and these were screened for their activity against mosquitoes. So we reckon we screened something like 4.5 million different chemical compounds at the beginning of this exercise. And very soon it narrows down, and we identified something like 27 different classes that really looked like they had quite some potential. But as you go through this process of understanding how compounds work, taking out things that might be toxic to humans, taking out things that are unstable, taking out things that look similar to other things, you really start to narrow it down. And today we have a handful, and I can't tell you the details because these are still commercially sensitive, but we have a handful of different chemical compound leads that are candidates for making into indoor residual spray or dual active bed nets. And those are very interesting, and we could think about how we mix and match those and how those might be used in an implementation program. But sort of in parallel with that as well, we've been looking at repurposed insecticides. Oops, sorry, keep using the wrong button here. We've been looking at repurposed insecticides, which are insecticides that are already known and manufactured for use in agriculture, and having a look to see whether any of those equally could be useful for development into vector control products. And again, we have very few number of chemicals here that we're interested in that have got that are target candidates. And then just more recently, we've been, and Amir Ghali from Western will talk about this later, we've started to get interested in a third product class, the attractive targeted sugar baits. And but the same logic applies here. What insecticides are going to be useful in an insecticide resistance management program if you're going to establish a whole new class of products with the attractive targeted sugar baits. I'd like to just draw your attention to the bottom timeline here, and you can see that we anticipate that we may have some novel IRS products available within, say, 3 or 4 years' time, and the dual active ingredient bed nets will probably take a little bit longer. So this whole R&D program actually takes about 15 years, and that's a significant amount of time, obviously, and attracts a significant amount of funding to make it successful. And so what does it take to actually bring one of these products to market? Well, it's multifunctional. This slide looks complicated, and it's designed to give you that impression. It's a multifunctional activity and requires a lot of things to come together to make a successful product. So I will talk about some of these areas in a little bit more detail, but obviously entomology is really fundamental. The compounds have to be active against mosquitoes, but equally not be subject to cross-resistance. Formulation is another very important part of a successful vector control product development. Safety is obviously very important as well, and we can't forget our ability to manufacture and the cost of goods, and all new products have to be underpinned by the freedom to operate, access to the right intellectual property. So we know that these are difficult markets. There is no big commercial value in here. And so actually that manufacturing and cost of goods is a very important part. But I'd just like to say a few words about insecticide efficacy and cross-resistance. So we really have a very sort of tough criteria in our own projects for product development. We have collections of wild mosquitoes that bear the current status of insecticide resistance from the field, and it's really important that we test our new potential candidates against wild mosquitoes. And we also use the Insecticide Resistance Action Committee framework to select chemistry as well. And this is a framework that's developed by the agricultural sector, where they look at all the different insecticides and they put them into different classes according to how they work, how they kill the insects. Because if you have two, well, like pyrethroids would be a class, and if you have two insecticides that belong to the same class, they're likely to be susceptible to the same resistance mechanisms. So this is a really critical piece of our selection process, that we actually pick chemicals that don't work in the same way to each other. So what we're trying to do is to spread our list of candidates widely across the different IRAC groupings. And we also know that, just to thwart us really, that mosquito resistance to insecticides often isn't the mechanism that is founded on their particular mode of action, but is often an internal metabolic capability that the mosquitoes have. So what we're finding is that that a lot of our wild mosquitoes that demonstrate resistance to vector control products do so because they're able to metabolize the insecticide. So we're setting up a battery of tests, working with the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, to look at this, and we're getting some very interesting results. So this is also very critical for us in terms of selecting candidate chemistries that we believe are going to be robust and sustainable in the field. Thank you. So product safety is very important. Those of you who have experience in the agricultural insecticide area will know that this is a very time-consuming business, and it's a very costly business. But we have to make sure that our products are safe from a toxicological perspective, and that they're safe ecotoxicologically. And of course, WHO requires us to do safety risk assessments to demonstrate that. So that's an important part as well. And then I mentioned earlier that formulation is a really crucial part of being able to deliver vector control products, effective vector control products. We're sort of in a bit of a unique situation here when it comes to products like bed nets, because we're trying to put insecticides onto or inside fibers that we weave into bed nets, and that's, technically that is really very difficult to do and requires significant expertise. So this is not very easy at all. And then we also have very strict and challenging product profiles from these sorts of products. They've got to withstand 20 washes, they've got to last 3 years fully effectively. And if you're talking about dual active insecticides, where you've got two different chemistries you're bringing together, then again the challenge is doubled, if you like. So this is a very significant and important part of product development, but absolutely critical. And we partner with some organisations who've got some excellent capability in that area. So I hope I've painted a picture for you that product development is a complicated, challenging, and very interesting business. But I guess actually only the most successful products are really going to make it through all of these challenges and come out at the end with some effective vector control products. So just to give you a little taste of what we've got in our pipeline, I've had to blank out a lot of detailed information on this slide because obviously it's commercially sensitive. But this is just looking at a time horizon, and we're looking at where we are today and the choices of insecticides that are available for vector control products. And as you can see, pyrethroids, organophosphates, and carbamates. We know there's widespread resistance. We talked about that earlier to those products. But we are seeing, and you'll hear from Suzanne and John in a minute, about two very new exciting chemistries that are coming along, clothianidin and chlorphenapir. So that's great. That starts to give us some opportunities to really get into insecticide resistance management. But if you remember back to that pink arrow slide that I showed you earlier, we're not at the end of the game yet, and we need to be bringing on further candidate chemistries that we can build into products. And what I've done here on this slide is I've organised the rows by IRAC class. So you can see what, do you remember I mentioned earlier that we look to pick compounds from different IRAC classes so that we can then use that for a basis for our insecticide resistance management. And you know, it's very encouraging, I think. You know, there certainly are some options there that we are evaluating. Oops. So I'd just like to wrap up then and to restate really that the goal of IVCC is to maintain the gains that we've seen in malaria elimination by developing a toolbox of new chemistry vector control products that will over time be able to replace redundant products. But eradication does require good IRM practices, and GPERM, I think, is a good starting point, at least for thinking about that. So our goal is to provide the insecticide toolbox and the associated vector control products, but actually it's down to all of us to make sure that those are used responsibly and effectively if they're going to be sustainable over the long term. So I'd just like to sort of thank everybody who helps us with this fantastic endeavour. We're only going to be able to deliver our goals through partnership with innovators and with the continued support of our funders. So thank you very much to everybody who's contributed to this journey so far, and we look forward to that in the future. Thank you. I've finished.